What's happening, guys? Scott from A Hornet's Nest. Welcome back to episode 16 of Tutorial Tuesday. As always, it is so good to see you. And in today's episode, we've just finished spraying the left side console, the primer green. It looks incredible. I'm really happy with how it turned out. If you want to copy this color at home, it is a Dulux's Gecko. It is as close to a prime as I've found. And there's no one set primer color. They've kept the green going from back in the day when they were using zinc chromate. It used to be yellow, then they found out it was carcinogenic, so they tried to trick everyone, put black into it to make it green. Everyone caught on to that, but now they just use primer, and it's just a anti-corrosion primer. So that's why it's green. I'm gonna keep the inside of the console all green. When it gets all skinned, we're gonna mask where the panels go, and then we're gonna paint it the top coat gray. So it's gonna look very cool, but let's get into today's episode. We are going to recreate this, but on the right side console, and I'm going to teach you all the mistakes I made on this one, so you don't have to make them yourself, making a real efficient build for you. So let's head over to the assembly area. Let's get started. It's going to be a really cool episode. All right, here we are ready to go, and let's start building the right side console. Now, the takeaway from today's episode is don't make the same mistakes that I've made. I'm going to tell you every mistake I made building the left side console. That way it's a more efficient build for you. Less time building, more time playing, and it's going to be a lot more of an enjoyable process, and it's going to be a lot less tantrums thrown. So the first step is, I really recommend to go print yourself the assembly files. Go and print it nice big A3. I've gone and bound it. It makes it so much easier to see what the part numbers are, where the screws go, and especially the small pieces like the tiny heat inserts, you're not going to want to miss those. So that's the first step, is just go and get yourself an assembly document printed for each step. That way it's going to make it a little bit easier to follow along. Now, if you've gone and CNC'd this or jigsawed this at home, you're probably not going to have edge holes drilled in for the pilot holes. Now, I'm going to show you two real easy ways how to do that. One using a 3D printer, and the second using just a piece of sticker paper, making real easy work of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to add the edge holes to the aft stringers, which go on the back area of our side consoles. Now, you could go and create a jig for this, but it's a fairly awkward shape to go and 3D print a jig for, so I'm going to show you the easiest and most simplest way, and that is to use sticker paper. What I've gone and done is I've gone and printed the edge faces with the center marks on some Avery sticker paper, the same we used in episode 3, and all we're going to do is peel that off and stick it onto the face. It doesn't have to stick well, it just needs to stick enough so you can go and punch a hole into it. So let's go and add sticker to the front face. Always take care, making sure you orientate these correctly. That's probably mistake number one, is take time to make sure that the orientation of these holes are correct. Now, all we're going to do is grab our punch, and we're going to find the center hole, and you don't have to make a big one. You just need to make a little bit of a divot in each center. Now, I'm going to put a link for all the files for this printout and any other files I use during this assembly process, and you can go download them for free. There we go. So that's all the edge holes punched there for that. Now we're going to grab for the back end. Remember, alignment is key. Don't rush this process. I think that's actually a big takeaway from this, is don't rush it. This is probably going to be filmed over 2 days because it deserves that level of attention. Now, if you're using 18mm or metric MDF like I am, these files were printed from the Open Hornet plan, so it's 19.05 or 3/4 of an inch. This is 18mm that I'm using, so if you're using the same as me, expect to have about a 1/2 mil overlap of the sticker on each side. That way you know that the holes are centered. Cool. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna start drilling the pilot holes, and mistake number 2 that I made was I drilled the pilot hole too small. We're gonna grab just a normal drill driver here. It's got a 2mm bit on, and that's what the Open Hornet plans recommended. That's an okay size if you go and clamp the sides of your MDF together while you're screwing into them, because MDF's just gonna split. If that screw, we're gonna be using one of these, it's a number 8 black oxide screw, it's the McMaster recommendation. It really needs a 2.7mm drill bit to make the correct size pilot hole for what's online recommended, but I'm just gonna use 3mm. Just remember, if you have too small of a pilot hole, you will split your MDF. But even though I've said don't use the 2mm drill bit, I'm still gonna use a 2mm drill bit just to center mark these pilot holes, because putting a 3mm drill bit onto such a small punch is gonna just slip right out. So I'm gonna create a little bit more of a divot, and then we're gonna come in with the 3mm drill bit and pilot hole the entire length. Alrighty, so that is both aft stringers done. Now, just efficiently work through everything. Don't keep changing drill bits. And what I mean by that is, if we're drilling 2mm divots for 3mm pilot holes, do that for every pilot hole you have to do, and then go from there. So what we're gonna do is show you how to edge drill the supports between the ribs. And I've actually got a really easy way to do it. And that's using a little jig that I've created. And all we do is we slot a piece of MDF in there. We know the exact dimension of where those holes are, and we're gonna drill straight through it with our 2mm bit. Again, I'm using 2mm because it's more accurate using a smaller drill bit than using a big behemoth of a drill bit just to drill a little divot. What I recommend for these little jigs is maybe print yourself 3 or 4, because over time, the drill bit is naturally going to wear away at the PLA. So the more it wears away, the more inaccurate your actual drill location is going to be. I think if I had to redo this, I would make these holes a bit bigger and put a heat insert in there that I know my 2mm bit's gonna be able to go through. That way it's never gonna wear away at it, and you can keep this in forever. But that looks great. Alrighty, next error coming up from what I did. Don't make the same mistake I did. On this, I have put an arrow on there so you know which way is up. Now you can, if you've gone and cut these out of pine, or even if you've milled them like I have out of MDF, there's no real right or wrong way what's up. But what you do need is both sides to be in the same orientation, and that's where the arrow comes in handy. Now I've gone and labeled each of my stringers with letters, so I naturally know that side's up and that side's down, because I don't want my letters to be upside down. So yeah, take that into consideration. If you haven't drilled it the wrong way yet, you will drill it in the wrong way. There's those that have and those that will. Alrighty, so that is all of our stringers done, and the jig is still pretty much intact, so we can use it for another time, but that's looking pretty good. Now what we want to do, grab our drill set, and we're going to upgrade the bit to a 3mm bit, which is going to be our final size. As annoying as it is putting bits back in their space, there is nothing more annoying than having missing drill bits. I'm going to pop that one back in there as well. The more you stay organized in this, the better it's going to be when you are building it. So now, if we go and take one of our black oxide screws here, we are looking that we just need to lose sight roughly until maybe the top flute. So that's how far we want to drill it into. You want to keep drilling as straight as you possibly can, but look, if it's on a slight angle, it's not the end of the world. There is, as precise as it looks and as well as it's been designed, there is a little bit of play in there. So don't stress too much about that. But obviously you don't want to drill it skew, that you're now drilling straight out of the side of the piece of wood. What I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to pop a respirator on, and the reason for that is even though I'm drilling the MDF and it's not causing that much dust, you want to stay safe, and if you can smell it, it means something's going into your system. So I'm going to pop a respirator on for the rest of it, but I will take it off when I want to have a chat to you guys about what we're doing. Alrighty, well, that is all the edge holes drilled for the sides. We've got to do these and then we're going to start installing it. But I want to show you something just about a respirator quickly. I've been painting the left side console, and it's purely just the left side console I've been painting green. And you can see the filter on my respirator is bright green. That just shows how much there is. Like, I didn't think there was much paint flying around in that shelter until you put a respirator on and you actually see that color show up. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna finish edge drilling these, and then we're gonna start the build process. Done. And when you do put your respirator down, don't put it in the work. Keep this area nice and clean. That's why you see me always putting it well and truly away from where I'm working to stop that sort of issue. Well, that's all done. Let's move our book to the side. I'm just gonna pop this to the side, and that way we have a nice area to work with when we start assembling this, and we're not chipping our wood with these little chips that are gonna push themselves into the paint job. So let's get a broom and get this nice and clean. All right, so now that's all clean, let's start drilling the pilot holes into the bottom of our ribs and the back bulkheads. What we're gonna wanna do is keep the efficiency going. We wanna drill all the pilot holes at once. That way we're not switching between drill bits, driver heads, we're just keeping it nice and simple. So let's move all of these out the way. We're gonna bring our bottom console rack here, and we're gonna start drilling the pilot holes for the ribs. So we've got the right side console. J fits back here. I've gone and labeled every single one of my ribs. That way I know where it fits. So we're gonna put J at the back. And can I recommend, if I bring it this way, only drilling the pilot hole for the middle of each rib and each stringer. And even though that's not the most efficient way of doing it, it is a bit easier, because what we don't want is putting a lot of pressure on one side, the rib coming out ever so slightly, that drills it skew. We know that the middle is gonna stay nice and flush. Once we assemble and fasten it in, then we can go and drill the rest of the pilot holes. Tad less efficient, but it's gonna make the job a whole lot neater and more accurate to align. So let's get into that. We're gonna drill all the center pilot holes, and then we're gonna drill them in. Respirators on and get into it. Alrighty, that's pretty good. You could see I went turbo mode and did all three stringers because I could push down nicely on that and it's gonna keep it nice and stable. You could see in some of the stringers, or sorry, the ribs, that as I was drilling into it, MDF's quite a solid thing to drill into, especially if your bits are getting blunt, it's gonna wanna push it out. So that's why I was able to do all three stringers. And actually, I can just leave those in there because that's our next step. But as always, when drilling, keep your area nice and clean. Let's get the broom again and start sweeping. So what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna now page to page 2 of this, where we start the assembly. Now, we've got all the parts list here. So I'm using all McMaster parts. Yeah, you can probably find the parts cheaper elsewhere at your different hardware store, AliExpress, whatever, but the reason I like the McMaster system is it has the same product numbers, and that's all I care about, is efficiency. I've gone and labeled all my drawers with the product number, so I know I can just pull out A-110 and it's gonna be the correct one. So what we're gonna need is some of our MDF black oxide screws here. These are 1.5 inch, number 8 gauge screws. And we've got our countersunk bolts and nuts ready to go with everything we pretty much need for the first page. So the first page talks about assembling the back bulkhead, and then it goes into the ribs. Do the back bulkhead first, because when we start drilling into this area, if this rib is in place, it's going to foul on that and you're not going to be able to get a drill in there. So put the back bulkhead in and then start with the ribs second. But the next mistake that I'm going to tell you is don't go and install this piece here. It's the triangular side wall of the back bulkhead. Leave it out, because that way you can have access all the way in here when you're respraying it, when you're putting the nuts and bolts in, making easy work of it. But if you are using the gluing method, you are going to need to install that piece first. I'm just using screws and tongue and groove joints to hold mine together, creating a real secure fit, allowing me the luxury of being able to put parts in later. So just remember that if you're doing it my way and you can take parts in and out just using screws, have a think about leaving that part till the end. So let's get into it. Let's turn our flooring upside down again, and we're going to put 3 screws into the back stringers. You can go and use an impact driver. This thing is like using a sledgehammer on a nail. It's gonna absolutely send it into the MDF, so be careful with that. If this is all you have, just use it on a slow speed, don't go full pelt. The next option you've got is using the old standard drill driver, which you're gonna find most of your DIYs are gonna have. It's where it's got a drill setting as well as a screw setting. If you are gonna use it for screws, turn the top knob to screw. It's going to torque out a lot earlier, in the sense of I can hold this, applying frictional torque or resistance, and it's going to want to screw straight through it. I turn it to the screw setting, it limits how much torque it's actually applying to that. So remember that. Drill is for drilling, use the screw setting for screwing, and you're not going to bore out your pilot holes. The next one you can go get is a electric screwdriver. It's a 4-volt screwdriver by Ryobi. It's not terrible. I actually bought this thinking I wanted to get into smaller spaces. It does the job, it just sounds like a dying moose when it's like really struggling. So it works. It actually works really well for doing the nuts and bolts. So I always like to have one of these. It's not as much force as these two, and it does the job real easy. So let's get into it and start putting these screws in. I'll show you what the dying animal sounds like, and then I'll probably go back towards using an impact driver. There we go, like a deer or something. So yeah, it's a bit noisy, but impact drive works really well. Next step we want to do is put the forward aft bulkhead on the piece. Now, next mistake that I've made is I assumed all the angles were the same. This bottom angle is about 68 degrees, 67.5, 68 degrees. This top angle, one would assume it's the same. It's not, it's 63 and a bit. So when I sent this to my mate, we just cut it both at 68. Nice thing is 63 was a doable angle to chuck it on the table saw and just rerun it through. But just remember, check all the angles, and you may need access to the Fusion files for that to make easy work of calculating those angles. 68, 63, and then I'll show you one on the back bulkhead as well, which isn't 90 degrees at all. So I want to now screw these in. What we're going to do is we're just going to pre-drill some of these in, and then we can almost let it hang in these holes when we drill it. Then this one's a bit of a tricky one to find, but perfect. There we go. You know it's fitting well, because there really should just be about a millimeter level segment before this stringer joins it. You don't want them butting up against each other. So now that's all good, we can go put the rest in. That is pretty sturdy. Looking good. Now, if we go and have a look at the diagram, we can see that our flat bulkhead, which is the back wall, needs to have an assembly attached to it. And it's this big piece here. The next mistake that I made was I went and assembled it all, not thinking, where is it going to be really hard to paint? Am I going to get turbulent airflow? The thing with spraying is you want smooth airflow. The moment you start spraying into cavities like this, it's going to become a washing machine of air inside, and that paint's not going to sit nicely. So what I've done is I've pre-sprayed it the primer green, and that way when we assemble it up in there, we don't have to worry about dousing that area with paint just to get a nice color. It's going to be pre-colored. I'm going to pre-attach it to this back bulkhead now. So let's grab this one here. And what we're going to want for it are 3 number 41s and 3 number 45 nuts. Now, these parts here have actual nut recesses in that hold it almost like a spanner, so make sure they're aligned. And that leads me not to a mistake that I made, but almost a I'm glad I did it. If you're going to find replacements, especially if you're in the metric world like I am, if you're finding replacements, they have to be accurate to the dimension of these nuts. Because otherwise you go find a different nut size, it might work, but it might not fit perfectly in that recess and you're not utilizing all the functionality of the cockpit. So have a think about that next time you have a think of switching to metric. It may just be easier to go down the Imperia route. It is all up to you. That should fit nicely there. Sweet. What we're going to do again, pre-drill just the center ones. That way you can seat them in their recessed holes, and then you're good to go. Oh, that's actually going to work out really, really nice. Let's go and put these next to it. Don't do that. Definitely don't be like Scott there. Firstly, put clamp on it. How many times can I forget to put the clamp on? But don't work sideways on your piece. And also hold it. Then you're not gonna have that issue. Cool, that's great there. Now, this is where a MVP tool comes in. This is a right angle adapter for your drill. It works really well. I'm gonna plonk it on, might be able to fit it to this drill driver. And it just gets into these real small spaces. Yeah, nice. Because what I want to do is I'm going to fit these on here like that. Oh. Nice. So that is all nicely secured. So let's go and start installing the ribs. Remember, we've gone and put the pilot holes in for the middle. So we're just going to assemble them using the middle screw only. And then once they're all assembled and they're sitting nice and flush, then we're going to drill the pilot holes for the edges. So let's get into that. Do you know why that wasn't fitting in? And I did that for a very good reason. Not fitting it in properly, but the way I've designed it. All these tongue and grooves are a different size. And the reason for that is it's gonna stop doing what I just did then and try putting the wrong tongue into the wrong groove. So let's go and actually put J where it belongs. Then we're gonna screw up. I'm gonna leave this one just for now. Because it doesn't have a lot of support there, it is a naturally weaker piece. I'm gonna leave that for the very end. But I think by now you know how to successfully pilot hole and you've seen me do it enough. So I'm gonna go off camera now. You don't need to spend the next 5 minutes watching me pilot hole. All I have to do is pilot hole the outer ones, and this back bulkhead and front bulkhead have their own vertical screws as well. So let's get that done. When we see each other next, we're gonna be installing the blocks between each rib, giving them their spacing. So what I'm doing here is I'm just drawing a rough center line for the support blocks. That way, when I go and align these, I'm not trying to have a screw there and then trying to work out where the pilot hole actually is. I can roughly put the center line and it's gonna marry itself up. The reason for that is we don't actually have a lot of wiggle room. So if we go and connect J and I together, which are these two pieces, you can see there's not a whole lot of wiggle room there to get 2 screw tips in to go and try align where it is. So you need to know where the rough center line is. So let's get into it. Working our way from the back to the front because the back is the hardest, but there are 2 access slots in this front bulkhead, but it can be a bit tricky. So the way we're gonna do it is we are going to get our smallest screwdriver with a 90-degree tip, and we're gonna swap it out with the extended drill bit. That way we have all the ample reach that we need. It's a bit weird, but once you get your head around it, it's not too bad. So let's get into it. We need 4, and we're doing the J and the I blocks. As you can see now, I've got ample reach. And I'm just gonna do it until it starts coming through. There we go. Perfect. I'm actually really annoyed how easy that was to put in, because trust me, on the left side console, it took me like 20 minutes to do. And you just watch that in real time. All right, let's put rib F in. There we go. Nice, done. Well, we can go and lift that there like that. So pretty much we're ready. All we've got to do now is there are 2 threaded inserts that need to go in here that I'll put in separately off camera. And then we're pretty much ready to paint it, which is very cool. So let us put these in off camera. I'll give it a bit of a wipe down to get the dust off it. And we'll see you in the spray booth. And then it's gonna be all green. So it's very, very cool. Alrighty, so here we are ready to spray it green. It's what we've been waiting for. It's going to look incredible. Quick thing about spraying, especially the gaps, I mentioned it earlier, when you spray into a cavity of some sort, like spraying into these low-lying areas, it's going to create turbulent flow. So you're just going to need to adjust your spray settings. The less air you've got, the less turbulent it's going to be. But if you're spraying with less pressure, you're going to need to dilute it more. So what we're going to do, we've got the Gecko color in the Wagner spray ready to go. We're using the Flexio 590, and let's just get into it. Not a lot of talking about it. Let's just color it green, make it look cool, and then next time we chat is when it's all painted, all dried, and we're busy assembling where the panels go on the top surface assembly. So let's do it. Ooh, all right, well, it's sprayed. The first coat, I should say, is sprayed. I'll probably do another one. But you can see it looks incredible. It looks really, really nice. So all we've got to do now is let it dry, let it all settle, let it level down. I want to see then where there's patches I need to redo. The edges of MDF are naturally thirsty for paint. They're going to take their time. I'll probably do another coat on them. Just like on the left side console over there, it took 2 more green coats in the sense of I waited for it to dry, I sanded it down, and then I put a second coat on. So that's the 2 green coats, and then it's looking pretty good. It's as good as I want it to be. All right, let's get into it. We're in the final stretch. Let's get this built. We're back from the spray booth. It's been about 4 days since we last filmed. It does take time. The big thing you want to do is when you're doing your coats, give it ample time to dry. The worst thing you could possibly do is wait for it to be touch dry, then start assembling it because it hasn't completely cured. You don't want to be scratching it because it will just become a gummy surface if you apply any sort of pressure to that paint. So let's go and attach all of our side railing. During that 4-day period, I've gone and put all the heat inserts in. I've gone and installed all the nuts into the recesses, and that's going to be a whole separate tutorial. I don't want to clutter this tutorial with all the nitty gritty. But yeah, let's just get it done. We're gonna start with popping this back piece in first. This is the one I said, if you're doing it through my method, leave this one out so you can have all that access in there. So now we can install that there, ready to go, because we don't need any more back area access. Again, if you're using the 18mm MDF like I am, we can expect to see a 1mm recess in there just because it was designed for that 19.5 0.05 or 3/4 inch MDF. Go. Now all we're going to do is start with these back edges. This is two separate components. When you are doing yours, make sure you do put the heat inserts into this piece here so you can join them as one piece. That is quite a common one to miss. If you look at the drawings here, it doesn't point out too easily that there are two heat inserts, just because they can't put so much detail in it, they'll just become so cluttered. So that's why if you are going to do this, just have a look. If there is a hole in the PLA, it generally means something is going to screw in there or insert into there. So just double check that. So let's get into it. What we're going to be using are these A203 pan head bolts. We've got our washers and we've got our nuts, and then we're pretty much good to go. That's all we've got to do. So let's get into it, bit of a time lapse with that, and then we should be able to finish up. These threaded inserts, they just self-tap into the MDF, and they've got a hex adapter at the front of them. So you just use an Allen key and you just push them in, give them a twist, and you just install them like a wall mate. Couple of clockwise turns, back it off a bit, clockwise turn, back it off a bit. That way you get a real neat entry into it. If you don't back it off and you just bore them straight through, you'll get that like mushrooming on the surface of your piece. Well, all we've got to do now is just install all the sill brackets onto here and pop the sill in. And the nice thing about having this pre-drilled is I know this is perfectly aligned. So I've left these with a bit of play in them, and this piece here, once on top, is going to really space it out. So we've got the pre-drilled on the bottom, pre-drilled on the top. Naturally, they have to then sit flush. So that's why don't tighten these all the way, give them a bit of play. So when you put the top sill on, it actually does the lining for us. Alrighty, so that's pretty much all of our sill brackets on. We've installed this top upper assembly here. Bit of a trick with this one. There is a very small hidden little heat insert that goes into the bottom of this. Suggestion is if you are gonna do your final assembly, install your vertical panel, install this little bracket, then install this on top. It'll make it a bit easier accessing that screw. So all we've got to do now is align everything with our top sill. That's gonna sit on there. And then we are pretty much ready to go. We're gonna be using these ones, the 436s, they're the countersunk ones. And let's have a look here, let's start here. There we go. All we've got to do now is pop the trimming in, and that's gonna come this way. But by the time we do this off camera, I'm gonna have them screwed in so I can prime all the hardware. There we go. Pop these away. And then the final test is you want to make sure your heat inserts are aligned in here. Now that's probably the biggest mistake that I made during the left side console was I went and burnt my finger putting these in. Don't try stabilize the soldering iron with your finger. Don't even know how that happened, just lack of thought. But yeah, don't do that. I'm gonna grab this. It's gonna slot in there nicely, like that. Beautiful. And let's go pop our final piece in, which is this one here. It's the Ogs vent. Take one of these small screws and we're gonna just go place it here, there. Look at that. That is incredibly cool. It looks wonderful. So that's pretty much it. The right side console is built. We've got it all screwed in there. It's looking very, very cool. All I'm gonna go do now is tighten up all the structural bolts. That way we know everything's aligned. And then I'm gonna give it one more green coat to mattify it all over, evening out all those tonal issues. And it's gonna look very, very good. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. It's been an absolute ton of fun filming the process and building this. It's an incredible build. And having the McMaster parts list really does make it really, really simple to follow along. So yeah, as always, I hope you have a good week ahead. Enjoy your flight simming, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next episode where we are building the center tub, and I'm gonna show you how to paint that, dilute the paint, how to know your spray system is spraying correctly. So yeah, enjoy your week ahead, guys. I'll see you in the next episode.